Story number 1, Pump Station 7. I arrived at the Juniper Basin Water Treatment Facility at 18:30 on the evening of November 14th. The drive from Portland had taken 4 hours. I was replacing a technician named Holloway on a standard 72-hour maintenance rotation. His handover note mentioned equipment malfunctions in the filtration system and suggested I run a full diagnostic on the primary settling tank. The facility sits on flat ground about 8 miles east of the town proper, surrounded by scrub and low hills. It's a small operation. One main building with the control room and laboratory, a pump house, and 3 external tank structures. I parked beside Holloway's vehicle, a gray sedan that looked like it had been there for several days based on the dust accumulation. My initial walkthrough was routine. I checked the primary settling tank first. The tank should have been at operational capacity, roughly 70%, full according to the logs I'd reviewed before arrival. It was completely empty. The concrete floor was dry. There were no visible leaks in the structure, no evidence of a recent drain cycle. The logs showed normal readings through the afternoon. I made a note and moved to the control room. The control room smelled strongly of wet clay. That was my first concern I documented. The facility processes groundwater only. There should be no clay smell. The air was cool and damp in a way that didn't match the heating system's output. I checked the HVAC logs, nothing unusual. I opened the windows and proceeded with my equipment inspection. The sensors and monitoring systems appeared functional. I initiated a refill sequence for the settling tank at 19:15. The intake pumps engaged. The flow sensors registered incoming water at normal pressure and volume. I watched the tank from the observation window. Nothing entered it. The sensors insisted water was flowing. The tank remained empty. The smell of wet clay grew stronger. I shut down the intake and checked the physical pipes. No blockage. No damage. I ran the sequence again at 19:45 with the same result. I documented the discrepancy and moved to the break room to review Holloway's notes more carefully. His personal effects were in the break room. A jacket hung on the back of a chair. A coffee mug with his name printed on it sat in the sink. A paperback novel lay on the small table. His vehicle was still in the parking lot. I checked the facility log. He had clocked in at 1800 on November 12th and had not clocked out. I checked the residential quarters. His bed was unmade. His toiletries were in the bathroom. Holloway had not left the facility. I conducted a search of the grounds. The pump house was empty. The tank structures were empty except for the settling tank, which remained inexplicably dry despite my attempts to fill it. I checked the perimeter fence, no breaches. I reviewed the surveillance footage from the previous 2 days. Holloway appeared in the control room at 1800 on November 12th. He did not appear again. The cameras showed only empty rooms and hallways after that point. I contacted my district supervisor at 22:30. I reported the missing technician and the equipment failures. He instructed me to maintain operational status and told me a replacement would arrive at the scheduled changeover on November 17th at 0600. He said not to concern myself with Holloway's absence. That was being handled through other channels. On the morning of November 15th, I found sediment in the filtration membranes. It was a thick, gray substance that did not match any contaminant profile in our database. The membranes should have been clean. I had not run them through a full cycle. I collected a sample in a sterile container. The sediment was body temperature when I touched the container. It moved slightly when I tilted the container, not as liquid moves, but as something with internal structure moves. I sealed the sample and placed it in the laboratory refrigerator. I attempted to isolate which filtration stage was producing the sediment by running bypass sequences. The sediment appeared in all outflow pipes, regardless of which stage I bypassed. It was present in pipes that should have contained only treated water. It was present in the emergency discharge line that had not been opened in months. On the evening of November 15th, I found a handprint pressed into the concrete wall of the pump room. It was the size of an adult hand. It had not been there during my inspection on the previous evening. The concrete around it was slightly darker, as if the hand had pressed moisture into the surface. I photographed it and documented its location. I did not sleep well on the night of November 15th. I remained in the control room most of the night, monitoring the systems. The readings were stable but meaningless. Water was flowing into the settling tank, according to the sensors. The tank remained empty. The smell of wet clay had become pervasive throughout the facility. On the evening of November 16th, I heard someone operating the control panel. I heard keys being pressed in the control room. I heard the intake pumps engage. I left the administrative office, where I had been reviewing records, and went to the control room. I was alone. The control panel showed all systems running at normal capacity. The surveillance footage showed only my own movements in the building. I reviewed the footage frame by frame. There was no one else present. I shut down all intake valves at 23:15 on November 16th and locked myself in the administrative office. I remained there until my replacement arrived at 0600 on November 17th. His name was Marcus Chen. I briefed him on the equipment failures and Holloway's absence. I did not mention the sediment or the handprint or the sounds I had heard. I did not mention the wet clay smell, which had faded by morning. I drove away from Juniper Basin at 0700. My assignment was marked as completed without incident. The facility was reclassified for infrastructure review pending a full structural assessment. I was transferred to a municipal treatment site in Pendleton. My supervisor instructed me not to discuss operational details from Juniper Basin with any personnel outside the district office. The file was archived and sealed. I have not returned to that location. Story number 2, Witness 12. I arrived at the safe house in Adena at 1400 hours on a Thursday in March to relieve Agent Castellanos for a standard 48-hour protective custody rotation. The witness, Michael Prout, was a 42-year-old accountant scheduled to testify in 8 days regarding irregularities in a construction firm's federal contracts. He was cooperative and low maintenance, spending most of his time reading financial journals in the upstairs bedroom, while I maintained perimeter checks every 90 minutes and logged vehicle traffic on Xerxes Avenue. The house itself was unremarkable. 2 stories, brick, detached garage, a quarter-acre lot with mature oaks. The security setup was standard reinforced entry points, blackout curtains, a panic button in the master bedroom and kitchen. Castellanos briefed me for 20 minutes, noted that Prout had been quiet and compliant, and left at 14:30. I did my first perimeter sweep at 14:45. On the first night at approximately 22:30 hours, I noticed Prout standing motionless at the top of the stairs facing the wall. His hands were at his sides. He was not moving. I called up to him twice, no response. I climbed the stairs and observed him for approximately 40 seconds before he turned and walked back to his room without acknowledgement or eye contact. I documented the incident in my log and attributed it to stress. Protective custody can produce unusual behavior. I increased check frequency to 60-minute intervals. During my 0-200 sweep, I found him in the same position, facing the same section of wall. This time I did not approach him immediately. I watched from the landing for 3 minutes. His breathing was regular. When I spoke his name, he turned and went back to his room without incident. I made a note and continued my rounds. By the second morning, Prout began speaking about the man in the wall. We were eating breakfast at the kitchen table. He was describing someone named David Corner, who he claimed was watching from inside the plaster. He provided specific details: approximate height, age, a scar on his left hand. I ran a background check on Corner against Prout's known associates. No connection existed, no record of any prior contact. I contacted my supervisor and requested psychological evaluation and possible extraction. I was instructed to maintain position. The trial date was imminent. Relocation would compromise witness security. I was told to monitor and report. That evening at 1900 hours, I observed Prout pressing his face against the hallway wall. He was whispering continuously. I timed the episode at 11 minutes. When I approached, I noticed the plaster around his face appeared darker, as though wet. The moisture had no identifiable source. The heating system was functioning normally. There were no pipes running through that section of wall, according to the house blueprints. I asked Prout to step away from the wall. He complied without resistance and returned to his room. I examined the wall more closely. The moisture was warm. It had a faint metallic odor. I wiped it away with a cloth. Within 30 seconds, I observed marks appearing in the remaining moisture. They formed letters. DKOERNER. The handwriting was not present when I had first wiped the wall. I photographed the marks with my phone. When I looked again 60 seconds later, the wall was dry and unmarked. I made the decision to physically remove Prout from the wall if I observed the behavior again. At 2300 hours, I found him in the hallway in the same position. When I attempted to move him, he became violent. I was forced to restrain him. During the restraint, I observed the name written again in the moisture on the plaster. The same handwriting. The same name. I administered a sedative from the medical kit without authorization and contacted emergency extraction. I provided a cover report of witness psychological break requiring immediate hospitalization. Prout was transferred to federal medical custody at 23:45. I remained at the house until the extraction team departed, and then secured the property. The safe house was decommissioned 2 days later for structural concerns. The official report cited foundation settling and water damage that required remediation. I was reassigned to desk rotation for 6 weeks. My incident report was filed under administrative seal with instructions that all field notes related to the protective custody assignment were to be archived in the restricted collection. I have not returned to the house in Edina. I have not requested access to my original documentation. I have not made inquiries regarding Michael Prout's current status or location. The incident was officially closed and transferred to restricted storage on April 18th of that year. Story number 3, Terminal C. I arrived at Boise Airport at 11:30 on a Thursday night to relieve the outgoing TSA supervisor and complete the standard shift handover for the graveyard crew. The terminal was quiet. The day shift had cleared out, and the evening flights were mostly gone. I signed in at the security office and reviewed the incident log with my predecessor, Marcus, who had been managing the checkpoint, since 3 in the afternoon. Marcus mentioned that Gate C7 had been flagged twice for maintenance due to a faulty intercom. Both times the technician had been called out, and both times he found nothing wrong with the system. The gate was operational. The intercom worked. No physical damage, Marcus said. It was probably just a loose connection that seated itself, or a software glitch that resolved on its own. He handed me the keys and left at midnight. I settled into the supervisor's office and began my routine checks. The graveyard crew was competent and quiet. We processed a few late arrivals and the usual cargo flights. Everything moved according to procedure. I made my rounds through the terminal every hour, checking gates, reviewing camera feeds, confirming that all areas were secure. At 1:15 in the morning, I received a passenger assistance call from Gate C7. The call came through the main desk phone with a request for wheelchair assistance at the gate. I responded immediately, as protocol requires. When I arrived at Gate C7, the gate area was empty. The seating was vacant. The gate desk was unmanned, which was normal for the graveyard shift. I checked the flight information display. The last flight from that gate had departed 4 hours earlier. There was no scheduled arrival or departure until 6:20 in the morning. I returned to the office and checked the call logs. The call had come from the gate area phone, but the timestamp showed it had originated from the intercom system, not the desk phone. That was unusual. I made a note and continued my rounds. At 2:03 in the morning, the intercom at Gate C7 activated. I heard it from the checkpoint, a clear female voice making a boarding announcement. Flight 612 to Denver, boarding all rows. I recognized the announcement format immediately. It was a standard recording. The problem was that Flight 612 to Denver had been discontinued in 2019. That route no longer existed in our schedule. I went directly to Gate C7. The intercom speaker was mounted above the gate desk, and it was silent now. The announcement had stopped. I checked the gate phone again and reviewed the security camera feed from that area. The footage showed the gate area completely empty. No one had approached the desk. No one had touched the intercom panel. The camera timestamp matched the announcement time. I contacted the shift supervisor at the main checkpoint and asked him to verify the flight information. He confirmed that Flight 612 to Denver was not a current route. It had been removed from service 5 years ago. I documented the time and the announcement in my incident log and continued monitoring. At 2:47 in the morning, the jetway door at Gate C7 unlocked itself. I was in the office when the electronic lock disengaged. I heard it from where I was sitting. The motion sensors registered movement in the tunnel connecting the gate to the aircraft docking area. I pulled up the camera feed for the jetway corridor immediately. The cameras showed only an empty passageway. The tunnel was clear. There was no aircraft docked at that gate, and the motion sensors were showing activity in a space that appeared completely vacant on the video feed. I sealed the gate area using the manual override and contacted my regional director. It was 3 in the morning. I explained the situation as clearly as I could. The intercom announcements, the empty gate, the jetway door unlocking. The motion sensors registering movement in an empty corridor. My director instructed me to file an equipment malfunction report and restrict access to Gate C7 until morning, when the maintenance team could investigate. He told me to continue monitoring, but to treat it as a systems issue, not a security concern. I acknowledged the order. I returned to the gate area and confirmed the seal was in place. The jetway door remained unlocked. but I had disabled the motion sensors and the intercom. I sat in the office and watched the camera feed. At 3:21, the intercom activated again. Another boarding announcement. Flight 612 to Denver. All rows. The announcement played for 42 seconds and then stopped. The intercom panel showed no signs of activation. No one had touched it. The system logs would show no record of the transmission. The announcements continued. Every 30 to 40 minutes, the same flight, the same destination, the same discontinued route. I documented each one. Time, duration, content. By 4:12 in the morning, I had recorded 6 announcements. At that time, I observed frost forming on the jetway door window. The building's climate control maintained 68 degrees throughout the terminal. The thermostat in the checkpoint area read 67 degrees. There was no reason for frost to form on the interior window of a sealed jetway door. I photographed the frost and added it to my documentation. I did not touch the window or attempt to remove the frost. I simply recorded its presence and the time it appeared. The maintenance supervisor arrived at 6:30 in the morning. His name was David. I briefed him on everything that had occurred during the night. He listened without interrupting, then went directly to gate C7 with his diagnostic equipment. He spent 2 hours checking the intercom system, the electronic locks, the motion sensors, and the jetway door mechanism. When he finished, he told me that all equipment was functioning normally. There were no error codes, no loose connections, no software glitches. The system logs showed no record of any announcements being transmitted through the intercom. The electronic locks had not been engaged or disengaged during the night. The motion sensors had not been activated. I showed him my documentation, the timestamps, the photographs, the incident log entries. David reviewed everything carefully. He said he would file a report with facilities management and recommend a complete system audit, but based on his inspection, there was nothing wrong with the gate equipment. He asked me to provide copies of my logs, which I did. At 8 in the morning, I was instructed to return gate C7 to normal service. The seal was removed. The intercom was reactivated. The motion sensors were restored. The gate was ready for the 6:20 departure. At 2 in the afternoon, I was reassigned to the main checkpoint for the remainder of my contract period. My supervisor told me that the facilities management review had been completed, and that all documentation would be forwarded to the appropriate departments. He did not specify which departments. He told me to continue with my regular duties and to contact him if I had any questions. I did not have any questions. The incident was closed. My contract ended 3 weeks later, and I did not return to Boise Airport.